For centuries, we have treated intelligence like a genetic lottery, a fixed trait decided at birth. You're either born a genius or you aren't. We tend to assume that thinking is a passive process. We treat it as something that happens automatically, requiring no more effort than breathing. But biology tells a different story. The brain is highly moldable. Through a process called neuroplasticity, it physically rewires its own architecture based entirely on how you use it. This physical restructuring only happens when the brain is forced to resolve a difficulty. However, most modern tools are designed to remove that difficulty entirely. When a search engine provides a result in milliseconds, the cognitive effort required to find that answer disappears, and the neural connections that would have formed during that struggle never take shape. To grow cognitive capacity, you must introduce deliberate friction. You have to treat the brain exactly like a muscle adapting to physical stress. The first way to induce this friction is through deliberate isolation. Great thinkers actively schedule distraction-free time to sit in complete silence and wrestle with a single, difficult problem. Charles Darwin relied on long stretches of solitary contemplation to untangle the massive complexities of evolutionary theory. When you sit down to solve a problem, your mind scatters. But if you push past those first 5 minutes of mental resistance, your brain realizes the old default pathways aren't working. It is forced to chart entirely new neural routes. The second mechanism tackles the natural state of the modern mind, pure, disorganized chaos. Leonardo da Vinci maintained over 7,000 pages of notes as a deliberate cognitive gym, working through the mechanical logic of future inventions. Forcing floating thoughts onto physical paper generates intense cognitive friction, compelling the brain to structure internal chaos into workable logic. Isolation and physical writing do not guarantee immediate answers. They are mechanical processes used to build the mental architecture required to handle layered, multifaceted problems. The third mechanism requires attacking schemas. Extraordinary thinkers actively dismantle the cultural and educational assumptions handed down to them. Physicist Richard Feynman famously refused to accept prepackaged answers. He insisted on breaking scientific concepts down to their absolute, unquestionable facts before moving forward. Questioning established truths strips away the brain's lazy cognitive shortcuts. It forces you to rebuild logical pathways entirely from scratch. The fourth mechanism is cross-disciplinary thinking. The most potent ideas rarely originate from hyper-specializing in a single field. Da Vinci merged his intensive studies of human anatomy, engineering, and fine art to generate mechanical blueprints for helicopters and armored tanks that would not be realized for another 500 years. Studying wildly different subjects triggers a neural collision. The brain builds literal structural bridges between regions that have never communicated before. Relentlessly deconstructing old ideas and forcing unrelated fields to intersect serves as the mechanical engine for human creativity. The final mechanism is cognitive recovery. Deep, focused thought is physically exhausting. It rapidly burns through massive amounts of glucose and oxygen. Thinkers like Darwin, Friedrich Nietzsche, and Steve Jobs walked in complete silence for hours to process their ideas. Stepping away without a phone, music, or conversation activates a specific biological function known as the brain's default mode network. This network acts as a background processor. While you walk, it quietly consolidates all those newly formed neural bridges and locks them into permanent architecture. The breakthrough rarely happens during the active struggle. The final pieces connect during this silent recovery phase. Genius is not a flash of lightning. It is the physical result of deep isolation, externalizing your chaos, questioning all assumptions, combining different disciplines, and finally resting. This means we have to completely rethink how we experience mental fatigue. Look at this chart plotting the learning process. You can see a temporary dip representing cognitive strain. That dip is not a sign of inadequate intelligence. The sensation of mental friction is the literal biological proof of your brain aggressively rewiring itself to handle a heavier load. Intelligence is a conditioned state. When you subject your brain to deliberate strain, you hold the mechanical power to build your own capacity to think.